Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's informational session titled AASM Foundation 2026 Strategic Research Grant Overview and Lifecycle, hosted by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine Foundation. This webinar will provide an overview of our strategic research grant from submitting a competitive letter of intent all the way through active grant closeout. My name is Sarah Phones. I'm the grant program specialist for the AASM Foundation, and I'll be leading today's webinar. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that your audio is muted and your video is off. Any questions that you have throughout the session, please add them to the Q&A in the Zoom platform. We will also be emailing a recording of this webinar out to all attendees and registrants, and it will be made available on the AASM Foundation website. Our learning objectives today are to learn about the 3 research focus areas for the Strategic Research Grant Program, gain insight into the letter of intent and application review process, and then understand the role of everybody in the post-award stage and how to maintain a successful project. So, as an overview of the research focuses today, this grant program is the largest funding program at the AASM Foundation. This program supports high-impact research aimed at addressing gaps in knowledge that impact the ability to provide optimal, patient-centered, cost-effective diagnosis and care for patients with sleep disorders. We have 3 different funding categories for this program. These also pertain to their period of performance. So a category 1 is for projects that are up to $250,000 for up to 3 years in duration. Category 2 goes up to $100,000 and up to 2 years. And then category 3 goes up to $50,000 for 1 year. Unlike most of our other grant programs, the Strategic Research Grant is topic specific. So these topics change yearly based on the various strategic initiatives of the AASM Foundation. And as far as eligibility, this program has very broad, inclusive eligibility. So sleep scientists who hold a master's degree or higher are eligible to apply. And we do welcome applicants both within the United States and internationally, as long as all of their eligibility criteria is met. So the Strategic Research Grant funds several different types of projects that are dedicated to making a difference and providing optimal, patient-centered, cost-effective diagnosis and care. And this can range from translational sleep and circadian projects, clinical research, and population-based research. As I mentioned, these topics do change each year, and they're based on the current high priority initiatives of the foundation. One thing that I want to specifically point out is the consideration of healthcare equity. This is an important focus for us. We want to ensure that all applicants are considering factors that impact sleep healthcare equity as far as access to services, social factors, and use of an appropriately inclusive study population. We also have some projects generally that will not be considered. This includes anything that does not fit into any of our stated research foci and the topics that are associated with those. And then projects where an investigator may have a financial conflict of interest or has the potential to receive a significant financial benefit are also not going to be eligible. So this year we have 3 different research focus areas, and so I will take you through all of those. So for 2026, we have AASM clinical practice guidelines, research gaps, and dissemination and implementation, AASM strategic plan goals, and obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, research gaps. The first 2 of these also have specific topics associated with them. So proposals that do not align with any of these will unfortunately not be considered. So first up, we have the clinical practice guidelines. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine has developed evidence-based clinical practice guidelines, position statements, and consensus statements for various sleep disorders and sleep health issues. So projects that are responsive to this topic will directly address research gaps that are identified in these practice guidelines, or focus on the dissemination and implementation of these practice recommendations. So this year we are focusing on the guidelines for central disorders of hypersomnolence and the accompanying systematic review, meta-analysis, grade assessment, treatment of restless leg syndrome and periodic limb movement disorder, as well as like the accompanying systematic review, meta-analysis, and grade assessment, treatment of central sleep apnea in adults, and evaluation and management of sleep disorder breathing in adult non-surgical patients. These last two should be available on the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine very soon. I do also just want to mention that any applications that are addressing the treatment of central disorders of hypersomnolence may be co-funded by the Hypersomnia Foundation or Wake Up Narcolepsy. All right, next we have the American Academy of Sleep Medicine Strategic Plan Goals. Specific topics under this one are sleep medicine awareness, practice success, and technology implementation. Additionally, for this topic, these applications may be co-sponsored by the Hypersomnia Foundation or Wake Up Narcolepsy if the project focuses on hypersomnolence or narcolepsy specifically. We also do want to call out that any projects that are utilizing any ASM sleep education resources, Sleep is Good Medicine, our guidance documents, as well as results from ASM Foundation funded projects, those may be given priority. And then last, we have our obstructive sleep apnea research gaps. So while there are not any specific research topics, all the projects must address known research gaps in the diagnosis and or management of OSA. There are several publications identified that have noted limitations, challenges, and gaps in the research. This includes the 2022 AHRQ technology assessment and the journal Sleep publication from 2021 on the apnea-hypopnea index. Additionally, projects that propose following outcomes for 6 months or longer will be given priority. So that is all three research focus areas for this year. As I mentioned, more details on these will be on the request for proposals, and that will be made available when the application opens on September 15th. But you can go to our program webpage now and see all of that information. This QR code will take you there. So before we get into too much of the process, I do want to give everybody an overview of the timeline you can expect. So this program is open once a year. Letters of intent open in September and close in October. From there, the LOIs go through a review process, and a certain number based on responsiveness and the other factors that you'll see here soon will be invited to submit a full application in January. Those full applications are due in March, and then funding decisions are made in June. If your application is selected for funding, the latest date to start a project would be in March 2027, and I'll go through what that post-award process looks like a little later. So it's a two-stage process. Obviously, the first stage is to submit a letter of intent. The AASM Foundation Executive Committee reviews all the submitted letters of intent, after which these applicants are notified whether or not they're invited to submit a full application. If the letter of intent is not invited, a potential applicant would not be able to submit an application for the grant. We are also putting these letters of intent through a blind review process. So this means that if you've submitted a letter of intent in the past, you may have been asked to provide bio sketches or other support pages for yourself as the principal investigator or for key personnel. We will not be requesting those. We do ask for contact information from the applicant, but that is not provided to the reviewers. That's only used internally by staff if we need to communicate. This is so that we can avoid really make sure there's no bias throughout the review process. And then stage 2 is for applicants who have a favorably reviewed letter of intent and are invited to submit an application. So these applications are evaluated and scored by our investigator-initiated grants review committee. We, at this stage, ask for a full application with research plan and goals, biosketch and other support pages, a full budget, a human or animal subjects protection plan, and then if you have submitted in the past and were not selected for funding, then you can also submit a response to your previous reviews. Because these are full applications, requesting bio sketches, requesting a research plan, these do not go through a blended review process. So for that letter of intent that you'll submit, this has been streamlined, as I mentioned a little bit, so that the focus is really on the research that's being proposed. We will request basic information about the project, principal investigator and the institution, and then the letter of intent about the project. As I mentioned before, this letter of intent has a blended review process, so we ask that you please not include your name or any other identifying information. While the actual letter of intent form that you'll fill out online will ask for your contact information and institution details, this is just so that we are able to get in touch with you. This information won't be provided to the reviewers of the letters of intent. So for the project information, of course, the title is self-explanatory, but in addition to that title, we also will request project keywords. This helps us assign your letter of intent and your application to the most appropriate person. So this can include the sleep problem you're addressing, population, the research type that you are working with. We use this to make sure that we can assign it to the most appropriate person. So let's keep that in mind as you're filling everything out. While we don't have specific topics for the OSA focus gaps, you should select not applicable. Otherwise, make sure that your topic that you select matches the research focus area. And then as far as your funding category and project period, you won't need to indicate the specific dollar amount that you intend to request, but please make sure that you are selecting the correct funding category. So if you have in mind that you need to request $250,000 over 36 months, just make sure that you're selecting category 1. So for the actual letter of intent portion, we will provide a template that all applicants are required to use in order for the letter of intent to be considered. So this guide outlines all of the required sections listed here, which include a description of the proposed research, the research focus, aims, background, significance, your approach, and your healthcare equity considerations. The letter of intent itself cannot exceed 3 pages, although any references that you include can go beyond that. And applicants should not have their name or institution on the letter. If you are referencing your own work at any point in the body of the letter of intent, you can reference that work, so that's acceptable. We will have a link to this guide later in the chat. As you're preparing everything, just make sure to keep these items in mind. Follow the template exactly, so make sure you include all the sections present on that guide. Don't include any additional sections. Adhere to all the margins and spacing. Figures and tables are welcome and accepted. These do count toward that 3-page limit. And then once again, please make sure that you are not including any identifying information. The letter of intent is evaluated on these 4 criteria. This will include responsiveness of your proposal, the significance of the research, healthcare equity considerations, and then the alignment with the AASM Foundation's strategic goal. So as you're getting ready to submit the letter of intent, make sure you go through the request for proposals in detail, and please always feel free to reach out to the AASM Foundation to clarify any questions. This QR code will take you to where you can schedule a meeting with me to go over any application or eligibility related questions, and we'll add a link to the chat to this before the end of the webinar. We are not able to review your specific aims, but we can potentially take a look and see if your proposal might fit one RFP better than the other. And any questions about if you're eligible or what we're looking for from these various research topics, please reach out. So after the letter of intent, we move on to stage 2 of applications. So once you've been invited to submit a full application, you will be provided access to the online application form. You'll also be asked to provide your abstract, research plan and goals, bio sketches and other support pages, a full budget, and a human and animal subject protection plan. I do want to take a moment to kind of touch upon some common questions that arise with a few of these components in the application. So the first one is the authorized representative section on the application. So this needs to be somebody from your institution's grant administration office who essentially is confirming that the institution is aware of and supportive of the application, and they'll be attesting to all the terms that are listed. On the application form, you'll see that there are instructions on inviting this representative to collaborate on your application. As the administrators, we can see which account completes which field on the application. So this is how we verify that the institution is aware of it. So they will need to be a collaborator and access the form from their own account. And then they enter their name, and that serves as a digital signature to attest to all of this. So this program does allow for multiple principal investigators. And in this instance, we just ask that a contact principal investigator be identified who will serve as the point of contact. As far as key personnel, we at the AASM Foundation define key personnel as anyone who is contributing to the development of the project in a substantive and measurable way, regardless of if they are receiving compensation. So whether someone is designated as key personnel or if they're serving as a consultant or in another role, that is really at the principal investigator's discretion as to if they need that substantive, measurable contribution. The other thing is that we do require bio sketches and other support pages for all principal investigators and all key personnel. All right, and then for the budget, we will request a detailed budget for each year of the project. So 3-year projects will have 3 budget forms to fill out. The one thing that I do want to mention here is that for project personnel, all of your key personnel, regardless of whether they're receiving salary, do need to be indicated here. And if they aren't receiving salary, we ask that you indicate the effort percentage. So even if there's no funds being requested for them, please still list them here and provide that effort. When preparing the budget, this is how we define direct costs and indirect costs. Our indirect costs cannot exceed 8% of the direct costs, and these indirect costs are included in that total funding amount. So if you're requesting $250,000, that $250,000 is inclusive of direct and indirect costs. The other item is our subtotals and total funding requests. So for each budget year, you'll have a subtotal table to provide the direct costs and the indirect costs just for that year only. At the end, you'll also have a total cost table that serves as confirmation of that full amount. The direct costs, you'll have to enter the sum of all the direct costs for all budget years, and the same thing for the indirect costs. These amounts will have to match what you provided each subtotal year. So while the form will do some of these calculations for you, when it comes to taking the subtotals to the total, you'll have to do those calculations and enter them in. And they do need to match exactly, even if it's down to $1, a penny, they have to match. So just make sure, double, triple check that if you're rounding anything, just double check that everything adds up. I do want to highlight some things that come up frequently as applications are being submitted. Make sure that you're adhering to page counts, page word counts, and follow that LOI guide exactly. We also require the current National Institutes of Health template for bio sketches and other support pages. These are available online through the NIH, so those will be there, but we require that you use the current one. And if you do list somebody as a key personnel, then they do need to have a bio sketch and another support page provided. As I kind of just touched upon, make sure when you're putting together your budget that everything is totaled correctly, all the calculations match, and confirm that your indirect costs do not exceed 8%. And then most importantly, I do want to make sure everybody is aware that errors that come up in your application that are not resolved can result in withdrawal of the application, which we do not want to do. So please make sure to keep an eye out for following all the guidelines in the application, but these are some things that come up more frequently. Additionally, communications about your application will come from our grant management system. So the email address that you see here, we recommend adding that to your safe senders list in your email platforms to make sure that you get all of those communications. So all of our grants have 3 deliverables that we ask everybody to keep in mind as you develop your application. Of course, making sure you address your specific aims, submitting an abstract for presentation at the annual SLEEP meeting. This is something that you can include in your budget related to travel and registration and abstract submission fee, and then publication of the research in peer-reviewed journals, Journal of Clinical Medicine, of course, but other peer-reviewed journals are more than welcome as well. All right, so once all the applications are here, how do we review them? So before we kind of go through this whole procedure, I do just want to touch upon how important it is to us that our review process is fair and objective. All of our reviewers are asked to adhere to a conflict of interest policy and a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement to ensure that your information is kept safe and confidential, and to prevent any conscious or unconscious bias from occurring at any stage of the review process. And additionally, there is no contact between the applicants and reviewers at any stage. So if there's ever any questions that arise, typically that's not something that happens, but everything will go through staff. So as I mentioned, the investigator-initiated grants review committee will review all the applications for this program. Our chair this year is Dr. Michael Grander. Our vice chair is Dr. Bharati Prasad. And then we have reviewers, standing review committee reviewers. We also will bring on ad hoc reviewers as needed to address gaps in expertise. So if there's a very high volume of pediatric applications, for as an example, we'll bring in people with additional expertise to make sure that every application is being reviewed by people with appropriate knowledge and expertise in that topic. For our grant reviews, we use the same anchor points as the National Institutes of Health. A score of 1 being a very strong, highly competitive, high impact application, all the way down through a 9, which indicates a low impact, non-competitive application. This year, we are adopting the new simplified peer review framework that has been established by the National Institutes of Health. The benefit of this is offering an improved focus on the potential for the proposed research to have an impact. So it's very focused on the impact, and it serves to reduce any conscious or unconscious bias. So each application will receive an overall impact score using that 1 through 9 scale. And these scores are determined by assessing 3 major factors, which I'll go over in a second. Our reviewers are asked to take into consideration only the materials that are provided in the application when they are scoring applications. So this goes back to that improved focus on the research itself, as well as reducing any unconscious bias or any prior knowledge that might impact. We ask them to take it from the application, only use what the applicant has provided. So these applications receive that numeric 1 through 9 score. The factors that receive a numeric score are importance of the research and rigor and feasibility. Expertise and resources will be evaluated for sufficiency. So the reviewer will deem that the expertise and resources of the team and the institution and equipment provided are either appropriate or they're inappropriate. We also have additional considerations that are not scored either numerically or scored with sufficiency. These will be human subject protections, vertebrate animal protections, as well as the budget and budget justification. So our applications are divided into study sections when it comes down to the review process, based on the research focus area. So we may have one focused on clinical practice guidelines, another for the strategic plan goals, another for OSA research gaps. And reviewers are assigned to study sections based on the applications and their own expertise. As I mentioned, make sure that when you're putting together those keywords, you can use things like the category of research you're doing, basic research, clinical, population, any special populations that are being studied in your research, or any topic areas like movement disorders, hypersomnolence. These are used, like I mentioned, so that we can pair every application with the best possible reviewer. Once these initial reviews are complete, our committee chair will go through the triage decision process. These are based on the overall scores that are assigned to each application and the critiques from the reviewers. So if an application is triaged, it won't be discussed by the committee. This is typically applications that are less competitive, but also applications that are scored very, very highly, that receive very strong high impact scores. These may be briefly discussed or not discussed because they instead just move to funding recommendation. For each application that has a full discussion, each one gets 15 minutes. So it's important that each application gets the same amount of time and discussion. All right, so once the review process is done, we move on to funding. So the funding decision process begins with the final scores, critiques, and summary statements coming from our investigator-initiated grants review committee members and our committee chair. The AASM Foundation Executive Committee will review all of those scores, critiques, and summary statements and provide funding recommendations to our board of directors. The executive committee can also, if based on the feedback that is given from the committee, they can also invite applicants to go through a rapid revise and resubmit process if they feel that the weaknesses that were identified can be quickly and easily addressed. So this process, not every application will go through it. The executive committee will identify applications that might be appropriate for that procedure and ask that they do some revisions. After that, our board of directors will make the final funding decisions. Once all of these steps are completed, notifications will go out to all applicants, regardless of the outcome. And as part of your notification, we'll also provide the summary statement and the reviewer form. So while you won't know who specifically reviewed your application, you will get all of their feedback and all of those scores. As with the letter of intent and application stages, all these communications will come from our grant management system. So again, make sure that you add this email so that you don't miss out on any information. If you're selected for funding, foundation staff will work with you and your institution to get you started on that project. So as the grant recipient, we ask for you to please connect with your post-award grant administration at your institution. This may be different from whoever you worked with to submit your application. If you have not started already, you should start working on your IRB or IACUC application approval or exemption, and then make sure you submit your grant recipient profile form. This is just information about you so that we can share your successes. And your grant administrator will then work with us on more logistical things like payment information, providing that IRB or IACUC approval, and negotiating the terms of the grant contract. All of these requirements that are listed here are all submitted through our online grant management system. So there will be online forms that you can upload everything into, just to make sure everything's all in one place. Once you have received your funding, you will have 9 months from the date of that funding to have all of this in place and have the grant contract fully executed. This date will be outlined on your notification letter, and typically, if this date lapses, we have the right to withdraw the award. So it's really important that you work with your grant administrator to get everything moving and make sure the contract is executed before that date. And of course, always stay in touch with us and keep us posted on how things are going with IRB and IACUC. We know that can be a time-consuming process, so always just keep us updated. Once you have started your project, we do require regular progress reports throughout the performance period. So projects that last up to 12 months have a progress report due every 6 months. Projects lasting 2 years or longer have annual reports, and then both of these will have a final report, which are due 90 days after the end of your project period. We do have specific forms for you online in our grant management system that you'll complete for these reports, and we will make those available to you, of course, if you're funded. The report will just ask for an update on your progress, an expense report, copies of any publications or abstracts, and plans for upcoming work for your project. It's really important to make sure that you're working with your post-award grant administrator to get your reports on time and completed by those due dates. So once you're done, after you submit your final report, we will work on closing out your grant. Any leftover funds that you might have will be returned back to us. On the other hand, if you've used up all or most of your grant funds, then we will issue a final payment. As part of that final report that you'll submit, we ask for the principal investigator to submit key project outcomes of the grant in accessible non-scientific language that we share on our website to make them publicly available. We want to celebrate the work you've done and share the progress that you've made. So here's an example of one that is on our website. We have many of these available that you can look at, but these will be a key part of your final report. And we also will share links to any journal articles or abstracts. We have also frequently asked questions that will help you out throughout not only the application part, but the active grant process as well. And this QR code will take you there. But as always, please feel free to reach out to Foundation staff if there's any questions or anything that isn't addressed on this page so that we can make sure that everyone is on the same page and clear about how everything works. So if you don't get funded, there are a couple of options. We, of course, would love to be able to fund everything, but unfortunately, that's not an option. So because we provide the summary statement and the critiques from the review committee, we encourage you to review them, take them into account, and consider using those to strengthen your application and apply for the next cycle. Because there's that resubmission element where you'll have an opportunity to address those critiques. You may want to do that for next year's cycle. The other option is we have a list of resources on our website of other organizations that are funding sleep research. So those are available to you as well. As much as we would love to fund everyone, these organizations may be even a better fit for your project idea. So I encourage you to look there as well to see what your options are. All right, and that is everything that I had. So thank you so much. I have about 10 minutes to open things up for questions, but please always connect with us. You can scan here to schedule a meeting with me, or please always reach out. We have our email, our phone number, social media. We want to make sure that everyone has a good sense of what this process is like, and we're always here to support you throughout the whole process. So let me see. I will check and see what's going on in the Q&A. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple of questions. So the first question is, are investigators who previously received an NIH KL1 Career Development Award still eligible to apply for the Strategic Research Grant? KL1, K23, or K99? The answer is yes. So because the Strategic Research Grant is investigator-initiated and it is not a career development grant, there's no mentoring or career planning element to the project. Yes, that prior NIH career development grant does not render you ineligible. You'd still be eligible. What other questions can I answer? I know that sometimes your questions can be very specific to you or your project or your own situation. You may not want to type it into a webinar. So if that's the case, please reach out to us and we can connect in more detail if that's one of the questions that you had. I know one thing that I did not touch upon that I can touch upon that is often a question as people are going through the letter of intent and application process is if there are any changes that need to be made. So if there's a change to your project title, if there's a change to the funding category that you're requesting, changes are acceptable. Changes, we understand that they happen. Typically, these do need to be reviewed by our leadership just to ensure that everything still kind of aligns and the project is still eligible. So in the event that you have a change of some sort to your project or your circumstances, we'll just ask that you submit a request explaining why. That'll be reviewed, and then we'll get back to you with what the review of that procedure is. So I know that comes up a lot, but we can definitely work with you on that. And then one question came in, will recording of today's overview be available? Yes. Anyone who registered or attended will receive an email once the recording is available, typically within 1 to 2 weeks. And it'll also be posted as a video on our website as well. So we'll go ahead and part ways for the day. But as I said, please reach out to us with any questions. Thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to seeing everyone's letters of intent for this program. Thanks and have a great day.